What's up, everybody? It's about that time for another edition of the Crew Radio Show. I'm Kevin Swan, co-host of the show, and the crew are professional people who are also friends that come together to talk about the things you want us to talk about. We talk about it all, and we don't hold back. So come on and join us for another edition of the Crew Radio Show. Good afternoon, everybody. All right, so I know y'all have had other sessions, and hopefully those sessions have been very informative and productive. This session might be just a little bit different, so let me say it again. I know y'all have had lunch, y'all have been through sessions most of the day. This session will be a little bit more engaging and responsive, so let me say it again. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. It's very good. My name is Kevin Swan. I serve as the pastor of Ivy Baptist Church in Newport News. And we have a panel that's on the stage that will introduce themselves. The topic for this session is centered around DEI. I know that in the booklet it says, is DEI necessary? We're just going to have a conversation, right? And we're going to talk about that. And so I want to just put some disclaimers out before we get started. So this is more of what we do as a show. We have been together, this panel, a panel of community leaders. We've been together for the past 10 years. And we have conversations like this all the time in settings where we do a radio show and where we do a podcast. And so what we want to do is simulate that experience today where we're having conversation. You all are in the room with us, and much like any show, there's a call-in period where you can ask questions or you can ask the panel as well. But the topic of our show today, or the session, is centered around DEI. So it's going to be engaging. It's not one where you're just going to sit and you're going to hear scholarly lecture information for the next hour. We want you to be engaged. We want you to participate. We want you to ask questions so we can have a good time. All right. Having said that, I want to introduce the panel, or have the panelists introduce themselves, and then we'll go ahead and get started, starting with Dr. Lyons.
Well, good afternoon. Okay, so is it on? Okay. Good afternoon to you. So I'm Dr. Alvian Lyons. I am the CEO of AL Inc., which is technically Alvian Lyons Inc., but it feels way too narcissistic to say your name twice, okay? So we lovingly go by AL Inc. It's a human relations firm, so I spend a great deal of time in corporations working on the human experience for the purpose of achieving strategic outcomes. So we talk about the people factor in all things. My background is in therapy and psych, so I used to spend most of my time dealing with couples who are struggling with infidelity. And people find that interesting, that you go from that to this. But breaches in trust are breaches in trust, whether we're talking about at work or at home. So we get a chance to do some really good work together, both privately and publicly, all in the support of creating a better home and work experience.
Yes.
Oh, good.
Good afternoon. My name is Anton Bell, and I am the Commonwealth Attorney for the City of Hampton, so I'm the Chief Law Enforcement Officer for that locality. I'm also the founder of Envision Communications, LLC, which is a multi-communications firm that addresses the brokenness of young people. So the vision of my firm is to ignite the potential in youth who are broken and are hopeless in the presence of need, and whatever that need may be. Because what I have discovered as being a Commonwealth attorney, that if you don't address trauma, trauma will address you. That's a moment right there. If you don't address trauma, trauma will address you. And so I have been a career prosecutor for more than almost 30 years now. And so being Commonwealth attorney is my position, but positioning young people to walk into their purpose, that's my passion.
I am Delegate Cia Price. I represent the 85th District in the House of Delegates. I am the first Black woman to chair the Privileges and Elections Committee, which is the longest continually running committee in our nation's history. I am the first out Black member of the LGBTQIA member of the House of Delegates, and I also am neurodivergent and disabled. So I bring a very interesting view to politics, but I also am the director of Virginia Block, and if you might have joined Mike at a session this morning, he's one of my team members. That's the Virginia Black Leadership Organizing Collaborative, and I'm really glad to be here today.
All right, can we give them a round of applause, please? We got the panelists that are here. Now, let me address the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room is I'm African American, and so is everybody on the stage. I'm gonna put the elephant on the room up front. Somebody might be asking, you gonna talk about DEI, you don't have any other representation, any other issues to be able to talk about this issue from a diverse standpoint? Well, let me offer two perspectives to that question, since I'm addressing the elephant in the room. First one is that our show is not one where we just talk about Black issues. So this presentation is not gonna be called DEI from a Black person's view. This is DEI, period, that we're going to have conversations about. That's number one. Number two, we did invite others to participate with us on the panel, and we had commitments up until the fact that some of their organizations came back to us and they said, hey, we would love to talk about it, but our organization told us it would be best if we did not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I just want to put that out there, that we did have others that we invited to participate on the panel. They wanted to come. Organization said at the last minute, nah, we don't think that's good because we don't know how the outcome of that's going to be if you're in a session, in an open forum, having conversation about DEI. So the brave souls are the ones that's here, that's up here on the panel, all right? They've agreed to stick with us. Let me also thank Charles Cheek. Charles Cheek is the one that's helped to lead this social justice conference. We have done sessions in the social justice conference for the last 4 or 5 years, but normally when we've done them in a side room. This is the first time we've done them in the ballroom. So we've moved up, y'all. We moved up. See,
with the Jeffersons.
We like the Jeffersons. We on the east side now. We got more room. All right, thank you, Charles. We appreciate you. Put that first slide up on the screen for us, please. Kind of set the tone for what we're looking at. So I'm sure you all have seen this slide before. This is a basic illustration of what the difference is between equality and equity. And I know these are buzzwords, catchphrases, things that we got to be comfortable saying or not saying because there's so much potential consequence behind using these terms. But just so we understand, and we don't assume that everybody knows everything in the room, so we want to start with the baseline. All right, so on the left, what you see is equality. And as you can see with equality, everybody has the same box to be able to see or not see above the fence. Do y'all see that? Right? So there's liberty and justice for all, equality, all that kind of stuff. But that's not equity. Equity is on the right side. Equity is where we understand that there are some people that don't have the ability to see over the fence like everybody else. And that with equity, there might be certain things that are necessary in order for everybody to be able to see over the fence. And so that means that in this case, it looks at allocation of resources, it looks at investments, it looks at how you're setting up certain things to make sure that there's a much better vantage point for everybody. So we want to use that illustration to kind of set the tone for today and have this honest conversation. We know that this conversation is hot button. We know that it's politicized. We know about all of that. But we want to make sure that we start from this frame of reference. So if we're ready to start this conversation, y'all say, let's go. All right, Delegate Price, we're starting with you, ma'am. Talk to us, give us the baseline and the background about DEI. What is it? How do we get here? What things should we know about as it relates to DEI?
Yes, so if this were a semester class, I would start back at the transatlantic slave trade, but I think they gave us an hour. And so if you go from the ships arriving at Point Comfort and run through the various forms of resistance that led to the end of slavery on paper, and then you discuss the racial experiment of the Reconstruction era, and then you get to Jim Crow. So That's a lot to fast forward because it is part of how we got to today, but just because of time, let's just start at what our country and who our country was from 1880s to 1960s. Hopefully you will learn to say, as we see what's going on now, never say again, this isn't who we are, because today is exactly who we are, and we're here to figure out how to be better in the future. So if we clue into the legal structures that allowed for discrimination due to race, gender, and ability status, we can learn a lot more about what DEI actually is by listening to the words of its opponents. Because what does an anti-DEI advocate for? Right? And so start thinking through that. What is it that they are advocating for? So start with me in the 1960s. Following the Civil Rights Act, affirmative action policies were implemented in order to help historically underrepresentation be changed to a more equal representation. What it was not quotas. What it was not dumbing down standards in order for other people to get into the room. It was two qualified people sitting beside each other going for a job, and the color of someone's skin not being the determining factor of them getting the job, right? So that was the onset of the affirmative action executive order 10925, signed by President John F. Kennedy in 1961. So the real kind of affirmative action come into the scene. How many of you were born, this is no judgment at all, I just want to get a sense of it. How many of you were born, at least born in 1961 where that was signed? Okay. Then in 1970s, we ended up having the rise of, I would say probably second wave feminist movement, Shirley Chisholm running for president, and more, the fight for the Equal Rights Amendment, more activism for equality being out front in your face. Now, a lot of people think of burning bras, but nobody really thinks about, okay, well, why were we burning bras? Like, you know, think about not just the picture, but the picture should really get you to start asking some questions. Who was born in the 1970s? So the 60s was still, raise your hand because you would have been born by it. Okay. Okay. So the 1980s, the movement really began to expand beyond race to truly include gender. Now, a lot of people that are seeing some of the fights that we're having today do not know that the court cases that allowed for you to be who you are today didn't happen too long ago. So when I'm working on right to contraception, people didn't know that contraception wasn't legalized for single and married women until 65, right? So make sure that we understand generationally, the people that are experiencing these things are sitting in the room with us because you were born when this was going on. The newness of it all. So the inclusion within DEI initiatives to begin including ethnic groups, religion, LGBTQIA became I wouldn't even say safer because we're not safe today, but we were able to speak about it more as the numbers for the movement were growing. That is also around the time that Kimberly Crenshaw coined the term critical race theory and intersectionality. So that's when that was becoming the way in which, how do we understand our existence through racism being within systems? Okay, so who was born in the 80s? So now 60s, 70s, 80s, okay. So then 1990s, there were dedicated positions to diversity professionals. So you end up seeing a chief officer of diversity. This is now in your job title. This is what you were doing and being paid to do. Now we're gonna talk about whether you were hired to just check a box or whether you were hired to really make some changes. Whole different story, we'll talk about it. But this became, you know, organizations becoming intentional about asking the question, oh, how did we get to be an all-white, all-male space? Should it be different? So the 90s, how many of you were born in the 90s? Okay, so we're getting closer to everybody. Okay, so then diversity training programs in the 2000s started popping up where you could learn about unconscious bias, because everybody has unconscious bias, but how many people will sit down and start to learn about what their unconscious bias is? The 2000s is really when it starts to come out that like, oh, our government was really built to hurt us. And like, these are not just bad cops. This is a policing system. These are my words. This is a policing system that was built to harm us, or the educational system as it was set up is based in colonial times. This was not built for a neurodivergent child to thrive. So these questions are coming out, and spaces are being built for people to feel comfortable within their position on the systems. So then Obama was elected in 2008, and this is where a lot of the journal articles say all of that pressure that was building up in regular life, the floodgates just opened. And you either had immense pride and hope, or you were mad, right? And so, okay, now everybody in the room was born by 2000? Okay, maybe. Gosh, y'all, I shouldn't have started because now I'm feeling old because somebody in here was not born. Okay. So then in the 2010s, we almost there, y'all, the 2010s, when businesses started to tap into saying, oh, yeah, maybe we should probably work on this too. Now, let's not get it twisted. A lot of businesses were doing it because they realized there were dollars left on the table. But if I throw a pride flag on it, or if I throw African colors on it, I can capitalize off it too. So again, you had some people that were doing the real work and some weren't, but all of it was coming to the surface. The Me Too movement gained momentum, and then you had Obergefell versus Hodges and legalization of same-sex marriage. And again, in the background, you have other things that are happening. Rise of social media. So back in the 80s, when some of these things were happening, you only heard about it in the hour at the news. You now have 24 hours in your face, either something that is helping you or something that is harming you, depending upon your perspective. And Trump was elected president in 2016. So then 2020, when we all had to stay home, any of our maladies, anything that was wrong got exacerbated. Housing crisis, domestic violence, your mental health because you may not have been able to get to your medicine or your classes, self-harm, substance abuse, all of that. 2020 took all of the stuff that we just talked about and made it worse and put a light on it because people were not at work. They were consuming social media and news for 24 hours, right? So then Breonna Taylor was killed, George Floyd was killed, and now we have major conversations that are happening because if Breonna Taylor and George Floyd both died, it's not just bad cops. It's now we are a mass movement around the world joining together for something. I don't know that everybody had the words for it, but then you have people that were trying to maintain the spaces and places that were giving them power. And when they saw TV and they saw rooms that were as this diverse marching toward progress, there was something that kicked in, and that's where you had groups that felt like whatever progress we had in 2020 went too far. And you had some people that understood whatever progress we have is still not enough. Mm-hmm. And these people are now starting to try to find a way to coexist. Now, stay with me, I'm almost done. Summer of 2020 is on a Zoom meeting. Christopher Rufo was attending and learned about CRT. And this was his personal journey when he realized that it could be weaponized in Republican messaging to unify people that were feeling like him. People that, some would be to understand that progress was leaving them behind. And so if you hit me up later, I can give you a New Yorker article that kind of talks about what that Zoom was doing. We don't have time to get into it. But then Rufo was invited to be on Tucker Carlson in September, and that is when the movement gained steam. That is when the term became the thing, CRT, the thing that Fox News said every hour on the hour to represent the feeling of being left behind in the progress. So that snowballed. It even got to Virginia when you had a Loudoun County parent that started to use CRT and started to look into what I would consider to be a regular history class was now, oh, this is too much. And then woke and all of these things really impacted the November 2021 elections, where the political messaging was built on the mischaracterizations of CRT and used as code for the grandsons of Jim Crow to be able to embrace all of their values outright. We've got to stop CRT. Was basically like, we've got to stop so that we never have another black president. And so my congressman at his town hall reminded me of a thing: when you're accustomed to privilege, equality feels like oppression. So now you have, my word, incels stuck in their mama's basement, can't get a job because they don't have skills, looking for a reason and someone to blame, and instead of looking inward, they now have CRT. Jump ahead, CRT lost steam, we gotta find something new. What is it? DEI. And then this is a direct quote from our now Secretary of something, Pete Hegseth. What was offered as a way to recognize, no, excuse me, this was about him. What was offered as a way to recognize the complexity of the country's history on race for a new generation of Americans was framed as an attack on America and by extension on older Americans. The divide, the divide, the divide. Now, I am going to jump to just ask, how many of you were born with the Voting Rights Act having been a thing? So how many of you were born after 1965? So you are the first generation in your family to be born into a country that had a full working democracy. So when we talk about democracy is falling, when we talk about these things that systems are needing to be doing, it's still also new. So then anyway, so let me end here. Legalized systems that were built on the foundation of deep-seated hatred and racism shut out certain groups from opportunity for advancement that were readily afforded to others. And then the tools that were put into place in order to fix the wrongs before they even had a chance to make a dent into the disparities, the group that has had the most advantage historically retaliated by fighting to rid the systems of those tools under the guise that the affected groups were being given an unfair advantage by misrepresenting the actual tools to dupe the masses, gaslighting us to feeling guilty for wanting equality, and then weaponizing their own internal reckoning of inferiority to those now being given a fair chance. And then add that now the three branches of government are in cahoots. And we get to today.
I could have said that in 2 minutes, but I'm gonna let you go ahead. What you talking about? Great job, C. I appreciate that. One of the things that you did mention that we talk about often on our show is systemic issues, right? That the need for DEI really based in large part because of the systemic challenges that our country was built on and that our country still has to deal with. So now I want to raise the question to the panelists. It's a two-part question, and Ton, I'm going to start with you. In your space, how have you seen systematic or systemic inequalities play out in the legal space, in the legal system, in what you do? How is systemic inequalities evident in your space?
So, Sia kind of hit you with part of it, which is when the transatlantic slave trade took place, when the Constitution, which is what all laws are based on in Virginia as well as the federal government, when it was written, African Americans, we were chattel, we were property. And so we did not have a place other than being servitude to the majority race. And so you have a legal system that says you do not have the same equality as others. So that's your starting point. Now it's built upon, and as we evolved, you have Jim Crow, you don't have the right to vote. And for those who don't know, if you are not on the voting registrar, you do not get to sit on juries. You do not get an opportunity to make sure that someone is held accountable. And historically, as we know, there was lynching in the South, and there was a lot of things that were being done to African Americans that they had absolutely no one to run to, because unfortunately, those who were supposed to enforce the laws many times put on a hood at night and enforced it against them. And so as a result of it, you have a system that African Americans typically either hated or feared, or both. And so now we have the prison system, which I would tell people, now this is going to shock some people because I'm a prosecutor, but can I tell you something? I'm an in-your-face prosecutor, and I keep it real. The prison system today is the new slavery. But don't get it twisted before you get your clapping going. Because one of the things that see now, we talk about systems and we also talk about behaviors. You can chew gum and walk at the same time. And one of the things that I always talk about is this: when you know the system is set up against you, you have to do those things that make sure that you're not vulnerable to being taken advantage of by the system. Let me make it real to you. I was the product of a single mother, 20 years old, had 2 kids, raised in the hood. My mother put a book in my hand, said you could be whatever you wanted to be, and I said, thank you. I went to Norfolk State on a full ride. I went to North Carolina Central Law School on a full ride because of that book. She said, you are not defined by your environment, and I will not allow you to bring your environment in this house. She was the po-po. Okay?
Lord.
That's who she was. And I thank her for that, because what she taught me is I was not a slave to my beginnings. My beginnings does not define me. But what it can do is be a vehicle for me to get to the next level, to be able to go back and help somebody else get out. And so as a result of that, she said, if you go down to, and this is how she put it, and this is a black woman born in the 50s. She said, if you go down there, downtown is what they used to call it. If you go downtown, you belong to them. That's what she told me. So she made me understand, don't put yourself in a situation where you will be vulnerable to a system that you already know was not built to help you, but to hurt you. That's first thing. Second thing, she made sure it was very clear is that the playing field was not the same. She always would tell me, and my grandma, get that piece of paper, Anton, she was referring to a degree. Get that sheepskin. She said, because you got to be twice as good. Nowadays, you got to be 10 times as good. I was elected in 2012 as the first African-American Commonwealth attorney in Hampton. Some people will clap to that, but I said, why 2012?
Right.
No one asked that question. Many times when I make that statement, they clap as if there's something to celebrate. No, why 2012 is the question I have. It should have been done. You're telling me that there was no Commonwealth attorneys or no candidates for Commonwealth attorneys of African descent that was smart enough, experienced enough, competent enough, savvy enough to be Commonwealth attorney at that time, prior to that time? Absolutely. But the playing field was not the same. So this is what I say to people when we talk about the system, particularly the legal system. Money, privilege, status always trumps poverty. Diversity, ethnicity will always trump it. That's why it's important to have the right people in the right seats, because every Commonwealth attorney is elected. And I think every judge needs to be elected. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. But why not? You handing out sentences. You should be held accountable for what you do. There should be a level of accountability that says, I am responsible to the community for what I do. I'm a hardcore prosecutor, but I'm also hardcore when it comes to preventative mechanism. Because if I can keep you out of the system, I just had a win-win for my community.
All right, very good. And we know about the systemic inequalities in the legal system, the bias system, the number of people in the African American community, the number, I know, see, you don't like this phrase, black on black crime.
Because it doesn't exist.
I know. The number of crimes perpetrated by an African American to an African American, we know. Okay. Right? I know we don't like that term. But y'all ain't gonna be yelling at me in this session. Just Alvia, you're next. Corporate America.
Yeah.
How have you seen systemic inequalities in the corporate American space?
So I'll just give you just one quick little data point, okay? So in 2020, relative to the number of executives on the S&P 500, there were 253 Black executives. Just if we narrow it down to the pretend conversation about DE&I, because the reality is the reflexive response we're getting to DE&I is often just focused on Black and white, as if it is not most beneficial to women, and to be most specific, to white women. But we don't have that conversation. And I am not suggesting that it is a bad thing that our sisters also get the opportunity to be representative in some of the highest places in our nation. But to suggest that we are having this conversation to include you in it is disingenuous. More often than not, the pushback is the number of brown faces that are showing up in these spaces. So the data speaks to the fact that in 2020, we had 253 Black executives on the S&P 500. And as compared to our white counterpart, which was 6,286. 6,000. So you're talking about 24 times the number of people of color who were in these positions. By 2023, because of the DE&I initiatives, we got to 417 Black executives on the S&P 500. While that was happening, our white counterpart or executives were at 6,469. So we're not having a conversation where something is being taken away from anybody. The elevation is still happening. It's just that instead of 24 times, we are only 14 times, if that's any better. Numerically, it is. But the reality is there's a disproportionate representation of people making decisions that don't even reflect the economic base that is creating the profit margins. So the people who are ensuring profitability in a corporation, the consumers, represent 13% of the United States, as in people of color. But that is not what's seen at any of the leadership levels. So the numbers by themselves tell you one of two things. Either Black people are stupid, which I imagine none of you would want to raise your hand to say.
Run your resume.
Okay?
Run your resume. Tell them your educational background.
That part.
Okay.
Yeah.
I promise. Okay. All right. So since she asked, so I have 4 degrees. I have 2 PhDs because I'm the child of immigrants. I'm first generation American. Both of my parents were born in the Caribbean. My mom is from Jamaica and my father is from Trinidad. And in a West Indian household, the only thing that levels the playing field is education. And if you were born, my maiden name, Brathwaite, there are never too many degrees you can get. So when I finished my first, my dad asked, what you doing next? When I finished my second, he was like, what you doing next? And at that point, I said, if you want to go back to school, you can go back to school. But the reality is that even with that, I have experienced firsthand what it is like always to be the only in a room. The neighborhood I live in to this day, we are the only family of color in our neighborhood, as in the neighborhood my parents, I should say, live in to this day. 40 years later, I'm now in my 40s, 40 years later, we are still the only family of color in the neighborhood. When Sia mentioned firsts, when you heard Anton speak to 2012, he was the first. We are in 2025 and we are still having cultural, ethnic, and gender firsts. So as I said previously, unless we are suggesting that there is an inherent inferiority that exists between women, people of color, and people with disabilities. Unless we are willing to concede that as fact, then the system is working against quality individuals being in powerful places. And that's the conversation.
All righty. All very good answers, and we're short on time.
Yep.
So we got to get the train moving.
Let's move.
All right, so we're going to give them opportunity to say something as well. So second question is relative to the first. And I also want to give a shout out to Jason Covington, our media guy. Can y'all give him a hand, please, who also helped us?
Hey, Jason.
Raise your hand, please. All right, so we know then, that based on what you all have said, and see, you gave the overview, that DEI was largely founded upon the systemic issues that we see happening in our country. It was the only way to make it equitable, all right? So, question for you, very quickly, to the three of you. How, in your spaces, has DEI influenced or helped or assisted in your professional career? Not you necessarily, but in the space that you serve.
So the House of Delegates is the one of the chambers within the state government. So like you see Congress, and shout out to Congressman Scott, who is in the audience. So we are the state level legislative body. Okay, so that's where I am. I first got there in 2016, and like I said, we are still experiencing first. Let me run it down. So we are the longest running state level government, because this is where it started, right? So in 400 plus years, there have been 32 black women that have served. 32. I am number 17, and I will be 45 this year. So when you talk about why are we still having first, I just don't understand, right? So as the 17th black woman that entered this space, I went in with a purpose, and that leads me to my answer being representation. So when you and I have the largest number of black elected officials in the General Assembly at 32, you have a black Speaker of the House, you have a black chair of the first ever black chair of the Senate Finance and Appropriations Committee, a black chair of the House Appropriations Committee. Those two committees are the ones that decide what's in the budget and how your tax dollars get spent. You have the first black chair of the House Privileges and Elections, so we're talking voting rights. It is not just about me as a black woman entering the room. That is just the first step. The little black girls get to see that I'm there, right? It is what I do with that position. And what I have done, because I come from Newport News and I know what voter suppression looked like, because Hampton Roads started some of the national cases that got us to, the Voting Rights Act. When I see, and I'll come into the room as someone that is representing a district that is 45% using Medicaid or some form of benefit, when I come into the room, even the questions I ask are different.
Yep.
Being raised by a physician who sued to integrate a local hospital. The questions I ask are different. The answers I settle for also different. Let me just give you one quick example. So something that I think should be bipartisan is ending hunger. I did find out that it's not, but we'll leave that aside. So I got a bill passed that established the Commission to End Hunger. I'm now as chair. The first thing we realize is we don't have enough information to make the decisions we need to make. So we put in a bill this session that literally says, let's have a work group of this educator. We have a researcher from CNU on the commission, get it all in a room to get more information. It did say, and paying particular attention to demographics. And if you were anti-DEI, that hit it. So the governor put in an amendment on that bill to take out all of the mention of demographics for hunger. Here is the trip. If you are so focused on being anti-DEI because you do not understand what diversity, and equity, and inclusion mean in real terms, not political misrepresentations, then you would miss that 8 out of 10 of the localities that are struggling the most with food insecurity are in rural Southwest Virginia. And you would miss that we, as a bipartisan, interracial, intergenerational group, we're trying to find out where it is so we can send the resources there. Now you just look dumb. But that is how, in an innocuous bill, the governor put anti-DEI ahead of trying to get people fed. Now, we did send that bill back to him, just FYI for a plug. He has until May 2nd at 11:59 to either veto or sign the bill. If you just wanted to reach out and let him know that y'all wanted him to sign it, that'd be great.
All right.
Shameless plug.
Ton, real quick.
So
In law.
So you have the uprising, or I should say, the increasing number of legislators in our Virginia General Assembly. As a result of that, our General Assembly, they elect judges. And so now we're seeing a major increase of African American judges that's on the bench. You're also seeing more public defenders who are on the bench, because historically it's been prosecutors or it's been private attorneys. And let me tell you this, although I'm a prosecutor, I recognize there are prosecutors who absolutely do not have the best interests of African Americans. Can we keep that real?
Yes.
Can we say it one more time?
Yes.
Okay, so I recognize that, because guess what? When I drive out of here, I am a black man. I am not the Commonwealth Attorney. And so unless you see me on the news, you don't know. And so as a result of that, I recognize that diversity is extremely important, even in Hampton as we speak, 2025. We see more African American young people come through our court system in our juvenile and domestic relations court. Every judge that sits on the bench is a white male. There has never been a person of color on the bench, although the people that they are determining their future and their fate are mostly African American. That's a question.
That is a question. Alvin, real quick. In corporate America, how have you seen DEI affect, impact, sphere, influence that you're serving?
So I'm going to take it out of corporate America to just give a real lived example of why it's so valuable, right? So every woman in this room who is 35 years or older, or everyone who loves a woman in this room that is 35 years or older, is loving someone or living the experience of perimenopause and soon menopause, okay? The issue
Lord have mercy.
with why
Let me listen to this.
Just take a deep breath on that.
I got a wife that's dealing with this. Let me sit down here.
You so wrong.
If you have a conversation with physicians who actually are interested in the data, and they look up how many research articles can speak to how you address these issues, if they look up pregnancy, they will find 15-ish million research articles on it. If they look up menopause, you will find roughly 150,000, which speaks to the fact that while women are useful to make babies, the research cares about you. But the minute you are no longer useful, nobody cares. Why is that shifting now? Because when you have more women who are physicians and experiencing these things that all of us born female will go through, there is a vested interest in finding out what's necessary to ensure that your experience is not traumatic. That is just a lived example of what DEI does. If you don't include the people in the conversation who are going to be living the experience, somebody's going to be poorly cared for. So corporate America is no different. If you are not having people who are part of the decision making about what your experience is going to be, because during the course of your lifetime, you're going to spend 90,000 hours outside of your home minimally, working for or with others that you did not choose. 90,000 hours of toxicity, trauma, stress, a sense of not, because it's not just diversity. Diversity is the number you can count. It's inclusion. That's the experience you feel. And you can go to a job and be part of the data to say that, woohoo, we're doing great things. But when everybody goes out to lunch, you're not included. When the email goes out, somehow you got left off the email chain. When the planning was done, somehow they didn't think about the fact that we're gonna have this corporate event someplace that only has stairs, but you are in a wheelchair. What is the message? It's that you're good enough to serve us, but you're not good enough to belong. And what DE&I, if we skip all of the facts, those are the numbers, we have to think about the inclusion. That's the feeling. What kills every one of us each day is the sense of stress and the lack of being seen and or valued, whether that's at home or that's at work. So the conversation is so much bigger than the stuff that people who have an agenda want to boil it down to. What we're talking about is, what is the quality of your life? And are you seen when those decisions are being made?
All right, look, we got very good. We could stay here for a while. And by the way, our radio show, The Crew, if you go to YouTube, it's on the YouTube, The Crew radio show. We're having this conversation because we know an hour is not enough time. And so we're going to continue the conversation. If you all want to continue it with us, you can check out The Crew radio show on YouTube. And so the question that I want to ask before we open up the floor, we've talked about the fact that it arises from systemic issues in our country that are still existing. You've given us examples of how it made your areas and careers, better, or for people in general better. Where do we go from here? Is the question. Can we even say DEI anymore? Do we still do the work but put it under another phrase or code? What do we do? How do we move forward in this space to be able to still do the work if we believe the work is necessary, knowing what's up against it? And this is not for everybody. This is one person. And then Jason, you can start getting the mics out. We can start taking questions. One person, real quick. Where do we go from here?
We may have various opinions about that.
This might be where we actually disagree.
Yeah, we may have various opinions about that.
Can you do it in 2 minutes?
I can. Okay, so I'll say this. Without DEI, we've been there before. We've lived that experience before. That's why I said we had to be twice as good, 10 times as good. We've been there before. We've done that before. In fact, if you look at social media right now, there are a lot of African-American TikToks and Twitter videos and everything else that you see that is telling African-Americans, you sit this one out. Because we try to warn you with that election. We told you what was coming down with Project 2025. And because people did not listen and they still voted, you go and sit down. You put your feet up, young lady. You put your feet up, brother. You sit that one out. Because we've been here. Let them find out. Because we know that you got to be excellent. We know that you got to be competent, more than competent. So it has not changed our paradigm at all. We know if we want to be in the room, we got to have that 4 degrees. We got to have the 2 degrees with honors from both universities. We got to have being able to fight the systems the way that Sia has fought the systems for the length of time that she's done. We know excellence, so we do excellence.
So I think I want to agree with my brother. But my fear is that when we have seen in the playbook that our ancestors left, we at least had a Supreme Court that was enforcing laws. So when we have a Supreme Court that will allow for a United States citizen to be kidnapped and held, like now I'm like, oh, like no, this is not civil rights. Now we can look at the civil rights playbook, but there was somebody that had Bull Connor in check. What do you do when Bull Connor is the Supreme Court justice? So when we're talking about history, we can learn from it, but I think we are in uncharted territory. And since we were short on time, I was going to sugarcoat it, and I was going to put it in a pretty little bow and give it to y'all. But I need white women to step up, and it's not about me kicking my feet up, and it's not about me having my feet up because I'm tired. It's not about having my feet up because of any other things. It could be all of that. It is me having my feet up because how do I go to Congresswoman so-and-so who won on the fact that she hates black people and tell her that I need a bill because it can help black kids? That's not going to work. But when she looks across that desk and sees herself saying, come on, sis, now you know Medicaid is more than just black kids. We need it. And you use the vernacular that speaks to her heart, the one that you hear around your own living room tables because your uncle's still saying it today. And you use that to help the fight because you have tapped in strategically. That's not an attack on you when I ask you of that. That is me asking you to take off the paraphernalia of being an ally and actually freaking be one. And that's what I need. That's what I need. That's what I need.
Like that.
Respectfully.
I need you to have some black friends. At the end of the day, what I know for sure is that it's really hard to hate up close. And the most effective work I've ever done is stuff that has nothing to do with the rules and the data and the policies and the procedures, not because they're not important, but at the end of the day, you can't legislate or policy your way into people caring. What you can do is relationship your way into that. When you love somebody who looks like the people who are on the ugly side of the policy, the procedure, and the law, it matters different. What I need you to do is to have some black people sitting at your kitchen table. What I need you to do is when you decide that the girls are getting together or the guys are getting together, then you look around at that table and see whether or not that reflects the heaven that you're hoping to go to one day. Because let me tell you what's not segregated: heaven.
And there it is. All right, we're going to open up the floor real quick in the time that we have left. We got some questions. Are you Jamaican, by the way? Because when I...
Told by my auntie, because I wasn't born in Jamaica, I can't be Jamaican, but I do eat curry chicken.
Yes. And ackee and
So is that a yes or
saltfish.
no?
I love
Right.
ackee and
Yeah.
saltfish.
Is that a yes or no?
If you're not intelligent enough to understand what I just said,
We need her on the show. Bring her on the show.
thank
She
you.
needs a microphone on the show.
Okay, what
Let me tell you something, Mike. Take that mic back.
I like
Go
her.
ahead. Go
We're
ahead. Go
limited
ahead.
time, folks. Calm down.
Yeah, please.
What I'd like to address is, I love your passion, but I'd like to tweak some of your narrative. When we talk about systemic institutionalized racism, doing 120% and being 10 times better makes no difference. When we talk about the mental health of both young people and seniors, I'm a proud 71-year-old woman, so I'm able to finally say whatever the hell I want. And I don't need to belong, I need to be. I would love to see you address the fact that we do not need a white woman to stand up for us. That is going back to the colonialism point of view. You have to understand when somebody hates you, because I was married, so I know this is true. We're divorced now, so that's the only time that you get out of it. We need to address the fact to empowering people through better mental health services, because when you're impacted by systemic institutionalized racism, you become institutionalized. And you can't raise the children that the mother gives the book to. Your anecdotal story is wonderful, but it's so limited to your beautiful experience. And so we need to see if we can get more mental health professionals helping those of us who have survived this bull, S-H-I-T, so that we can be empowered. I'm very talented, I'm articulate, but dealing with colorism, don't tell me I need somebody to look like me, because when I go into downtown Newport News, they take one look at my dark skin, and they will not let me in. So we need to look at the complexity of this situation and start putting our heads together so we can help those of us who've been traumatized to come out of it, so we can use our gifts. End of my speech.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I know you want to say something real quick.
And then I have to go to the bathroom because I'm 71.
No, so let me be clear, because we do have to speak quickly, that sometimes a soundbite might not reflect the paragraphs that come with it. I have never been asking for a white woman to speak for me. I am asking for everyone to tap in strategically to use their privilege to help someone else. And so if my black face cannot show up at the table, but yours can, then let's do that. Because there are places and spaces that I can traverse that you cannot. I am asking for us as a community to be strategic in how we advocate for ourselves. And so I just want to be very clear. And then also too, mental health is very important. But I did work 10 times as hard, and I got to the space, and the moment I got there, I helped change the rules so that they wouldn't have to work 10 times as hard. So you have to, I think, be realistic about the rules in which you are operating right now in order to get the wins to change the rules. Yes. And that's just mine.
Very good. We got another question real quick. Yes, ma'am.
What are your thoughts on the positions that the schools are in now to have to decide about taking out DEI or losing federal funding in the positions that it puts the schools in?
So I am empathetic, because right now we have, and this is a statement of fact, we have a governor who is aligned with our president. And so I would want for the students at our public schools to get the best education. And if that means in February, we call it History Month, but you still teach about Harriet Tubman, I don't care about the label just so the content is good. What I do care about is how some have not read the actual words of the thing. Because if you're strategic and you're smart, it's basically saying follow federal law. They're hoping that you interpret it in their anti-DEI, but we still have laws on the books. So be like the governor from Maine and say, see you in court, right? Mm-hmm. But I need for us to protect the system so that we have more civil rights lawyers later, right? And we have that continuum of people, so be smart about it. But we have some people that out of fear are just complying in advance, and I think that does us a disservice.
And I got to jump on that bandwagon. There is an election in November. Vote your values.
Mm-hmm. While we get this next question, don't forget to scan the QR code if you have questions that we don't get to you. Our show, we're covering this topic over the next 4 weeks, the Crew Radio Show. You can follow us. We'll have more conversation. So the conversation doesn't stop here. Scan that QR code and you can find out everything we're doing and leave a question, comments, or concerns.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Shalana Rice. I'm a second-year international studies major from Hampton University. And I was wondering, with the removal of DEI, how should young scholars go into the process of finding jobs in the real world?
Okay, so one, I would say that DE&I didn't get most of us our jobs in the first place. Correct. Okay, so don't be under the impression that we're now at a necessary disadvantage. Mm-hmm. It just means that the work that was being done to try to level the playing field is not happening in the same ways. But corporations who actually value that have not changed anything that they're doing. So, and because I get to work with so many of them, I can tell you that talent is talent. And there are so many who are still looking for talent. And as each generation makes clear that I'm only interested in bringing my talent to a corporation that has these values, what speaks louder than anything else is economics. So if you don't like the table, build a table. Go sit at a different table. Take your box lunch someplace else.
Yes.
But whatever you do, make sure that you don't give talent to a place that doesn't value you.
Period.
Right. Very good. We got time for one more question. One more question. Who you got? Right here? One more question.
I just want to comment on something you said about getting white women to invite or to be active. And I always say that it's up to us to ask, can I play the game? So lend them your courage and go to them, because they may not come up with the idea to invite you. Lend them your courage by saying, I'd like to go to that, and it's going to be uncomfortable for both of us, but then show up. One of the things I always talk about is the reason that we're not there is because they don't expect us to be there. We need to start showing up too, make them invite us, and then show up.
Interesting perspective. I appreciate that. I will just say that what's really interesting about women is the dynamics that men never see, that we are oh so good at creating. And if we are serious about closing the gap, because historically the most distrusting relationship is actually between women of color and white women. And the reason that that's the case is because of the in history, the ability to weaponize your tears. That those tears used to cost us our fathers and our brothers and our husbands. So that concern for how a white woman in the workplace even saying that I feel uncomfortable, or she attacked me when she said something a little bit elevated in volume, she was a little passionate about what she said. When that kind of stuff happens and it has real lived consequences, distrust shoots through the roof. The only way to close that gap is relational. But we have all learned to feel what we're not saying. We're going to have to start saying what we are feeling, even though that will be uncomfortable. So I appreciate what you're saying. I'm just merely saying that we are masterful at women, as women, at being real petty without any other than men knowing what we just did.
And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, can we give it up for the panel? Dr. Alvian Lyons, Commonwealth Attorney Anton Bell, Delegate Marcia Price. Remember, if you do scan the QR code and ask us a question, whatever we did not cover, we will try to address it on our show, our podcast. On YouTube, The Crew Radio Show. You can check it out. We air on Fridays at 6 p.m. locally, WHOV 88.1 FM. And you can go to the YouTube channel to check us out. And we will be having this discussion for the next foreseeable weeks. So, thank y'all again for coming. We hope you got something from it. If y'all want to say something to them, they're going to come down and y'all can greet them and ask your questions up front. Have a good rest of your day, everybody.
Know that we love you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of The Crew Radio Show. If you liked what you heard, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. We're always looking for great sponsors to support the show. If your company would like to reach our highly engaged audience, please drop us a line at thecrewradioshow757@gmail.com. Until next time, thank you for kicking it with the crew.